Tēnā tātou katoa, good evening. 6 people are dead after a fire ripped through a hostel in central Wellington last night. And as authorities can't put a number on how many people are unaccounted for, that death toll could climb. Police say they're treating the fire as unexplained, though Fire and Emergency say it's suspicious. And questions are already being raised about the safety systems in the building, with those who survived saying there were no sprinklers and not all of the fire alarms went off. Alexa Cook reports.
The top floor of a hostel full of people engulfed in flames. An inferno no firefighter ever wants to see.
This is the worst nightmare.
A nightmare that up to 100 residents inside the building woke to, some trying to bash down the doors to escape. On the top floor was Tala Silly, whose only option was to leap from the window. He was released from hospital this morning with a sprained ankle after falling about 8 metres onto a second-storey roof.
I knew I had to jump out the window or just burn inside the building. Yeah.
A decision that saved his life.
I opened the window. I was just hanging outside, just kind of scared at first, not sure if I can make it. But yeah, I just leaped off the roof.
What was going through your head when you realised what was happening and that you had to go out the window?
I just couldn't think. It's just all I do is just do it, man, do it, or you're gonna burn.
Emergency services rescued Tala and 4 others from the roof, but this survivor fears his friends weren't so lucky.
I believe I've lost about 3 friends from loafers. They jumped into the top floor at 1 o'clock this morning.
So far, authorities can only confirm 6 deaths. Their bodies remain inside the building and it will take some time to identify them.
We can't say how long the identification process will take, but I give my absolute assurance that we will work very carefully, methodically, thoroughly, and as quickly as we can.
Police still haven't been inside the lodge. It's too dangerous, so the number of people missing is still unknown.
This requires an extensive scene examination, and as you can see, the building is large and the damage is extensive.
It's been an emotional day for many.
I feel pretty devastated, and I found out about the fatalities early this morning, of course. If I'm honest, I burst into tears.
Fire and Emergency were called to the building just after midnight. It took them 6 hours to bring it under control. They say it's suspicious.
Is the fire being treated as suspicious?
Yes.
Though police aren't going that far.
At this stage, the fire is unexplained.
2 residents Newshub spoke to say there was more than one fire last night. This man, who doesn't want to be identified, says there was a couch fire 45 minutes earlier.
And I went downstairs and got told that the fire was out. So it was a fire that was started on one of the couches. So I went back upstairs.
Many of those who escaped fled without their clothes and shoes.
It's just absolutely unbelievable. I've never... Yeah.
A sentiment that this whole community shares.
Well, kia ora, Alexa. What is the next step for police who are investigating the fire?
Well, Fire and Emergency will hand over to police tomorrow morning so that they can actually get inside. Now, police say that it will take some time to get answers to retrieve those bodies and conduct a full scene examination. That's because of how dangerous the building is. The roof has collapsed. There's a lot of loose debris on top of it, and police say they will be quite slow and methodical in that investigation. Now, the Chief Coroner says that although they might be able to retrieve the bodies and take them to the morgue, people should be patient because it takes some time to identify them properly, and that's because of the likely nature and severity of their injuries. There has been some speculation over whether this fire is suspicious or not, and we've seen police today interviewing some of those survivors, and we know that investigation teams are coming in from around the country to help try and answer some of those questions.
Ngā mihi, Alexa, thanks so much. Well, Loafers Lodge passed a building inspection earlier this year. Those survivors have told Newshub that there were problems with the fire alarms. The building wasn't required to have a sprinkler system, and the Prime Minister hasn't ruled out a review of building rules and regulations in the wake of this tragedy. Leighton Hakel has more.
As the huge fire broke out on Adelaide Road, many neighbours woke up to this.
So we were kind of like, whoa, and stood outside in our balcony for a bit and just kind of observed this, like, insane, like, never seen this much smoke before.
Axel Dan and his flatmates watched in horror.
It was pretty crazy.
Today, the Prime Minister saw the devastation for himself.
Obviously this has been rough news for New Zealanders to wake up to this morning as we've seen the tragic events unfolding here in Newtown.
Tragic events now under the microscope as questions are raised about the building's safety systems. Survivors have told Newshub there were no sprinklers, and while alarms did go off, they were often ignored because too many times they were false flags.
I've lived at Loafers for 3 years. That fire alarm has been going off for 3 years at 12 o'clock. 3 a.m, 5 in the morning, and we ignore it.
The alarms go off, people don't even leave their rooms because they're always like people smoking in their rooms or something like that, and half of the bloody alarms aren't hooked up.
Something Fire and Emergency will look at as part of its investigation.
We're checking that now. We've been checking that to ensure the sequence of events with our own alarm monitoring companies.
Loafers Lodge passed a building inspection this year, and Wellington City Council says no concerns were raised by the inspector. The building was not required to have sprinklers, but some residents told Newshub they did have safety concerns.
I don't know whom we're going to complain to, the manager or the owner, or I don't know.
The owner, Gregory Main, wouldn't discuss those concerns or appear on camera while police are investigating, but he says he is deeply devastated and was in fact quite emotional when I spoke with him earlier today. He says his focus is on those who have died, their families and the surviving tenants. The Prime Minister isn't ruling out looking at the building rules and regulations following this fire.
We have regulations in place around health and safety for buildings because bad things can happen, and it is important that we regularly review those.
Though the focus for tonight remains on those affected by the blaze.
Well, Leighton joins us now live. Kia ora, Leighton. You have an update on those injured in the fire.
Well, Sam, just one patient remains in hospital. They are in a stable condition at Hutt Hospital. And Te Whatu Ora says it doesn't believe any other patients remain in any other Wellington hospitals tonight. Now, police are still urging those who may have been staying at Loafers in the past couple of days and that are safe to please get in contact with them on 105, quoting Operation Rose. And the same message goes for anyone who may have been concerned about family members or friends that have been staying there. Now, as for Wellingtonians, they are being warned of heavy traffic tonight as Adelaide Road remains closed as investigations continue.
Leighton, thanks so much. Well, I'm joined now by Wellington Mayor Tori Whanau. Welcome, Mayor Tori.
Thank you.
This is an incredibly sad day. How has it hit the community here?
It's been a very dark day for Wellington City, but it has also been an outpouring of love for the victims that we've lost in the fire, those who have been displaced, their families, and especially our fire and emergency management team who have worked tirelessly through the night to take care of the situation.
I think many of us have a sense that this just should not have happened in New Zealand, that it's an unthinkable tragedy.
Yeah.
In your role, what are you going to do in the aftermath to make sure that it doesn't happen again?
So there are two major things that I'll be doing. I'm leading a mural fund which we've donated $50,000 to already, and the public has donated $20,000. So it's up to 70, which is really fantastic. Okay, but also with the investigation that will come, we need to use those findings to ensure that that doesn't happen again. Wellingtonians need to feel safe in their city.
Yeah, okay. Mayor Tori, thanks so much for your time today and tonight. Well, Loafers Lodge was home to some of Wellington's most vulnerable people, many of whom lost all of their possessions in the fire. Those who survived gathered at a welfare centre in Newtown Park, where support has been pouring in today. Nick Trubridge reports.
Hemi Lewis has lost everything but the clothes on his back.
It's all gone. I'm still in the same clothes. This is where I crawled out. See my shoes?
Through coughs, Hemi explains he's lucky to be alive at all, somehow escaping this.
I opened my door and there was just smoke everywhere and there was flames coming from the roof. I couldn't breathe. So I hit the floor and I crawled the 3 flights down to the bottom.
Others weren't so lucky.
I mean, the people next door to me were dying, you know, and I could hear them.
Newtown Park, barely a kilometre from that horrible site, is now a stopgap home for many. But the question is, where to next?
I don't know where I'm going tonight.
And he's not alone.
A lot of uncertainty, because we don't know where we're going or if there's going to be room for emergency housing for us and that.
We're told between 60 and 100 people ended up here in the wake of the country's worst fire in decades. Ngusi Gaita Fenja has spent all day ferrying people to emergency housing, relatives' houses and places like Women's Refuge.
All variety of people are here. These people are very vulnerable.
And as if losing material possessions wasn't enough, some have lost so much more.
The first and foremost thing on their mind, the very first thing someone asked me when I walked in was, what could I tell them about their friends?
The government desperate to avoid one disaster being compounded by another, the capital's housing shortage.
Big priority is to get everyone somewhere to stay tonight, and obviously the agencies are pulling all that together. But you can imagine people in there are extremely traumatised and very, very worried.
The fire's out, but for those who survived, the sense of devastation, of loss, is going nowhere.
Nick, you're at the Welfare Centre in Newtown Park tonight. How many people are there still without a home?
Good evening, Sam. We've just had some official numbers through from Wellington City Council, and what we can tell you is there were around about 50 people that ended up here today. Mayor Tori Whanau has told us that 20 of those are now in emergency housing. So, of course, that is good news for many of the people in that story who didn't have much as is and now find themselves with even less. It was pretty hard standing here and listening to the plight of some of them today. These are people who, for whatever reason, have really struggled through life. They are people who will need our assistance. And Auckland City Council has said a mayoral relief fund will be set up. Anyone who wants to contribute can do so as well. You can access that via the Wellington City Mission website. So if Wellingtonians are sitting at home watching this tonight and feel the need to help, they can do so, Sam. But indeed, a long road to recovery for a lot of those people that we have spoken to today.
Incredibly sad day. Nick, thank you for that update. Now, this is, of course, a developing story. We will remain right across it. You can go to newshub.co.nz for updates. Rebecca Wright will be here later on 3 with Newshub Late, and Ryan Bridge will be live from the scene with AM in the morning.
OK, Samantha Hayes live at the scene there in Wellington. Thanks so much for the update.